Okay, let's talk about it. Sheryl Swoopes and Caitlin Clark. For those who do not know, Sheryl Swoopes, one of the greatest WNBA players of all time, has got a lot of backlash over the last 8 to 9 months because some of the comments that she's made about Caitlin Clark. And this backlash has really ramped up over the past couple of weeks because Stephen A. Smith has inserted himself into the conversation, and there's now a back and forth between Stephen A. and Sheryl Swoopes that is now not only lingered on a little bit longer than it probably should have, but it spilled over into the timeline where Sheryl Swoopes has made crazy comments, has leaked DMs, and it all ended off with her in a Twitter space where she gave some explanation and clarification on some of the comments she made about Caitlin Clark over the past 8 months. Unfortunately, it doesn't really make anything better at all, especially when you go back and do your due diligence, as she is asked, and listen to all of the comments in their full context. And I'm gonna be honest with you, it's somehow worse. Now, the first comment that actually sparked this did not start in the beginning of this season. It actually started last year when Caitlin Clark broke the all-time record for the most points in a tournament in college that was previously held by Sheryl Swoopes.
I set the record in 5 games. Right?
Yeah.
Because back then, we had a first round bye. So we didn't get to play, I didn't get that 6 games. So I set the record in 5 games.
Yeah.
So to me, yes, she broke the record, but she did it in 6 games.
It took her extra game.
Well, I'm just saying.
You can say that.
No, listen. If I have 6 games,
the record's different.
well, I'm going to have another 30 to the 177,
you were
Jordan.
averaging, what was it? 34?
30, yeah.
34.
30 something. 30 something. How about that? I mean, we're having a good time. We're having fun. But I don't really care what the record is, who has the record. Anybody that can put up back-to-back 40-point games, like, that's a baller.
Now, I'm gonna be honest with you all. A lot of people showed this to me on the timeline. I don't know. I feel like this is a very appropriate response. That is a very tasteful response, but also keeping the banner and competitive nature that is Sheryl Swoopes in the conversation. However, I do believe it's still important to highlight this because the same logic that she utilized in this response, for whatever reason, was utilized during the Gilbert Arenas podcast when it wasn't factually correct.
If you're going to break a record, to me, if it's legitimate, you have to break that record in the same amount of time that that player set it.
Okay.
Right? So if Kelsey Plum set that record in 4 years, well, Caitlin should have broke that record in 4 years. But because there's a COVID year and then there's another year, you know what I mean? So she's already had an extra year to break that record. So is it truly a broken record? Caitlin Clark right now probably takes about 40 shots a game.
Carry on.
I know you like that.
Hell yeah.
I said that because when she comes to the league, regardless of what team she goes to that has vets on that team, she probably ain't gonna get 40 shots a game. Was talking about breaking records and all of that. And so I said, well, yes, if she breaks the record in the same amount of time that the record was set in, then it's legitimate. But if you have an extra year to break a record, to me, did you truly break the record? So with COVID and all of those things, I thought, honest mistake, but maybe I'm not allowed to make those. I thought that it was Caitlin's 5th year, right? So the producer of the show looked it up and he said, no, it is her 4th year. I said, okay, on the show, but people don't want to hear that part. I said, you know what? If it is her 4th year and she breaks the record, it's a legitimate record. Great.
Yeah, this is her 4th season, though, so she would be.
Oh, she'd be legit.
A senior best.
She can just come back one more year if she decided to.
Yes, so that would be her COVID year. Okay. And so she has said she doesn't know if she's leaving or if she's coming back.
Okay.
So these
stats matter. That next year's stat, that should just be like, we don't even count.
That's true. That is. The other part that's really funny to me is I don't know if people understand hyperbole. So then people went on to say that I said Caitlin was 25 playing against 18-year-olds, which I didn't say. I'll clear that up. And that I said she takes 40 shots a game. So let me just say this. What I said was, with the COVID year, you have older people, men and women, playing against younger people because of the COVID year, and you get an extra year. So there are people who might be 23, 24. I just saw someone post the other day, there's a football player that's 27 years old playing against 20-year-olds. So I made that statement, but it wasn't me saying, yeah, well, Caitlin's 25 playing against 22-year-olds.
So when everybody understand what just happened, A, no, you did not go back and sit here and say, oh, it's a legitimate record, and so she actually did break it. That's not what you did. You did not retract your statements whatsoever. B, even though, yes, you didn't say specifically that Caitlin Clark is 25 years old, however, in the context of the conversation, you are implying that she's significantly older than a lot of her competitors because of this imaginary COVID year that you keep persisting that she participated in that never really existed. I don't know why you kept harping on that point whatsoever. And yes, I do believe that some of the statements in that podcast during that segment were hyperbolic. Like, I don't think that you really believe that she was attempting 40 shots a game. And the whole premise of that comment was to just highlight how in college, you're going to take a lot of shots, but in the pros, you're not going to take as many shots because the dynamic is completely different. So I understand that. However, the premise about everything is consistently being missed. It just makes it funnier that you got the information wrong. But the premise is, when given the ability to acknowledge Caitlin Clark for breaking a record, you could have gone down two different paths. The first path is praising her for breaking a record, and the second path is critiquing. However, that criticism turns into hate when the information that you're trying to critique her with is incorrect. That's the reason why people view it as hating. And trust me when I say I am not one of these people who believe that y'all should just get on your knees and just praise Mommy Caitlin. Oh my God, thank Jesus, Mommy Caitlin came and saved us. I'm not one of those people who believe that. However, I don't really think it's too much to ask to praise a player for breaking a record of that magnitude. But moving on, for the next couple of months, Sheryl Swoopes was quoted with certain things that more or less was just giving very reserved and conservative projections for Caitlin Clark entering the WNBA.
Will Caitlin Clark come into the WNBA and do what she's doing right now? Immediately? Absolutely not. How she can get her teammates to play with her. You know what I mean? Because at Iowa, she did everything. You know, however many shots you want to take, whatever you want to do with the ball, you can do. It's just a different ball game. And you have some players like an Aaliyah Boston, an Alyssa Smith, a Kelsey Mitchell, like they gotta have a rock. When you put these expectations on these young women in college to go to the next level and be immediately dominant, and when that doesn't happen, then people come back and say, oh, she was a bust, she was a flop, she wasn't that good. Just let them do what they're doing in college, enjoy what they're doing in college, and let them become stars in the WNBA. You know, I've been very clear about Angel Reese. Have conversations with Angel, I text with Angel, but even before Angel got in the league, I said, yes, I think it's going to be an adjustment period, not just for Angel, not just for Caitlin, but for every rookie. That's the reality. When you go from collegiate sports to professional, I don't care, male, female, there's an adjustment period. For some people, it takes half a season. Some people, it takes a lot longer.
But to be fair to Ms. Sheryl Swoopes, a lot of the comments that she made, in all honesty, made a lot of sense, especially with traditional thinking. It would be very, very hard for anyone to believe that someone will be able to come in and have the same type of impact that we're seeing with not only Caitlin Clark, but also Angel Reese. And so even though, yes, he turned out to be wrong, I thoroughly understand the reservation and the conservative projections from Sheryl Swoopes when it comes to Caitlin Clark. However, when you're wrong, you have to acknowledge that you were wrong.
I don't know if Chicago's in the playoffs right now without Angel. Is Indiana, excuse me, is Indiana in the playoffs right now without Caitlin? I don't know.
No. Last year, no.
Caitlin has done, I think, exactly what was expected of her with Indiana, right? The reason why they drafted her, what the expectations were. And I think she's done just that.
When talking about who's going to win Rookie of the Year, you sit here and claim that it's a knock against Caitlin Clark because she's meeting the expectations of why she was drafted there, to have the impact, to lead them down that playoff path, right? You did all that. But literally, in the beginning part of the season, you sat there and tried to shield her away from these exact same expectations, about how the expectations are lofty, about how you cannot expect to have immediate impact, and saying that, hey, I just don't want people to go back and turn around and say that she's a bust. But then when she meets those expectations, when she exceeds them, it's somehow a knock against her in the Rookie of the Year race. That literally makes no sense at all. Then you sit here and claim that potentially the Indiana Fever would make the playoffs even if Caitlin Clark wasn't on the team. Really makes no sense, because for people out there who do not know, the Indiana Fever have not made the playoffs since 2016, and they haven't had a winning record since 2015. As a sidebar, the Indiana Fever just clinched a playoff spot just yesterday. So how you believe that the Fever are going to be able to do something that they have not been able to do since the Tamika Catching era back basically a decade ago does not make any sense whatsoever. And then to even further it, just literally a few episodes later down in the podcast, when giving praise to the Indiana Fever, you list off everyone in the starting five except for Caitlin Clark.
I do want to say this because we talked about the Olympic break, who it could help, who it could hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen the complete opposite with two teams, the 7th and 8th place team. I think the Olympic break really helped Indiana.
Absolutely.
Like they look like they've spent time, whether they took time off or not, but they worked on stuff. I'm going to say shout out to Lexi Hull. I'm a big Lexi Hull fan. Watch her in AU. Lexi Hull shot the leather off the ball in their game against Seattle. Kelsey Mitchell is just stroking. She is just shooting the basketball. Aaliyah Boston, almost a triple-double. I know we're talking about teams where they can move and things changing, but if Indiana continues to play the way they're playing like this, they too are going to move up in the standings.
Now, Sheryl Swoopes went on record and claimed that she was specifically talking about how the players played against the Seattle Storm, the game that happened right before that episode, and she is correct. Like the stat lines that she was referring to in that soundbite were specifically to the Seattle Storm game. However, that still doesn't excuse you from removing Caitlin Clark from that conversation because in that game, Caitlin Clark had 23 points, 9 assists, 5 rebounds. In particular, in the fourth quarter, that was a very close game. She finished the fourth quarter with 7 points, 4 assists, and a perfect 3 for 3 or 4 for 4 from the field. She was a huge reason why they ended up winning that game. But more importantly, in that game, she broke the record for the most assists by a rookie in WNBA history. It is a layup for you to talk about her after breaking a record, but it seems as if when Caitlin Clark breaks records, you have a problem with it. I have no idea why. And the only reason why I know you know how to give praise adequately is because when it comes to Angel Reese, you go out of your way to do so, and rightfully so, because she's exceeded your expectations, because you wanted her to stat pad her way to the first 2020 game, even though she was playing in a blowout.
Before I get into that, I am going to say this. Shout out to Angel Reese, even in a loss. Listen, 20 boards.
It's crazy.
20 boards. Say what you want to say about how she's getting all these rebounds. Angel
really
is
crazy.
just going to go get the basketball, and she is constantly giving her team more possessions. And I'm going to say this, Spoon, I should text her, but I'm going to say it right now. I needed her to let her stay in the game to get 20 points. She had 19. I just needed her to get a 20-20, but I'll take 19 and 20, even in a loss.
Reese on the bench with 20 rebounds, a new career high, and 19 points with 2.5 minutes to go. Ball goes out of bounds and will stay with Chicago. I was hoping Angel would stay on the floor and join Sylvia Fowles and Asia Wilson as the only WNBA players in history with 2020 games.
Yeah, it would be special for her.
I know.
Which again is contradicting to the entire premise of your gripe with Caitlin Clark in the beginning of this year. You sat there and just trying to be very pure about records and stats and accolades and we got to get down to the nitty gritty and the details. But now all of a sudden you're willing to allow Angel Reese to play extra minutes in a blowout loss just so she can be the first rookie ever to receive a 2020 game. Let's be fucking for real for a second, okay? And in that Twitter space where Sheryl Swoopes was responding to a bunch of people, in all honesty, it was pointless. There were a few incidences in where she was very direct and gave, I believe, very reasonable and responsible answers to some of the actions that have occurred over the past handful of months, such as her talking about how she actually did apologize to Caitlin Clark, and that's how the leaked DM came about on people's timeline, is because she decided to show it to the world. And also, for those who do not know, Sheryl Swoopes is a color commentator for Dallas in Dallas matchup with Indiana. A lot of people were anticipating, hey, what was she going to say? How was she going to handle it? And she just didn't show up to the game whatsoever. She was replaced by someone else. However, she did explain that she wasn't replaced, that she was only contractually obligated for a handful of games, and that game fell outside of her obligations.
Second of all, I was only contracted to do 7 games for the Dallas Wings. So everyone thinks that I was replaced for doing the Indiana Fever game, when the reality is last week I told the producer that I could not do the Indiana Fever game because of a prior commitment.
But outside of a handful of moments, that entire Twitter space was nothing more but a bunch of people pandering to Sheryl Swoopes, which then allowed her to get off more lies than I felt comfortable with.
So I know somebody said that I called Caitlyn a bully. No, I didn't. So anyway, they were talking about the pushing and all the hard fouls and things like that. So he said, so then they're bullies. And I said, well, to me, that doesn't necessarily make them a bully. It was a question. I asked Gil, I said, so Caitlyn pushes off all the time. Does that make her a bully? It was a question. It wasn't me saying, so she is a bully.
Built for trying to bully. She's a bullier, right? No one feels sorry for the bullier.
She's not a bully. She's not a bully.
Oh, you probably just never seen the poster. She's bullying the veterans.
She's not a bully. Well, I mean, if you want to talk about bullies, we can talk about every time Caitlyn has the ball, she pushes off.
Oh, no.
When it came down to it, the introduction for a lot of people with you and Caitlin Clark was you attempting to discredit, belittle, take away, lessen the impact of her breaking a record while she was still in college. From then, you gave very conservative and reserved projections, which is all understandable. However, now that she has met and exceeded those expectations, for whatever reason, you have not given her adequate enough praise. And I think those are all acceptable expectations for anyone to have someone of your stature, especially when you were so loud with some of your criticisms and some of your reserved projections early on in the year. And it's just really overall disappointing that someone of Sheryl Swoopes' stature is becoming this much of a distraction of such a historic season, not just for Caitlin Clark, but for the WNBA at large. But yo, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And until next time, I'll see you all later. Peace.